The recruit laughed first. Loud, sharp, the kind of laugh meant to be heard. He pointed at the old man's arm across the table in the dining hall. Nice ink, Grandpa. What is that, some kind of tribal thing? The other recruits looked up from their trays. The old man didn't respond. He sat alone, as he had every meal that week, his tray untouched, his hands resting flat on the table. The tattoos ran from his wrist to where his sleeves began, faded black lines, symbols no one recognized, not unit crests, not flags, something older. The recruit leaned back in his chair, still grinning. Seriously, did you get those in prison or something? A few others chuckled, nervous, waiting to see what would happen. The old man looked down at his food. His face showed nothing. He was maybe 70, maybe older, hard to tell. His hair was white and cut short. His back was straight. His shoulders still wide under the gray contractor jacket he wore every day. He worked on the base, maintenance, cleaning. No one knew exactly what. He never spoke unless spoken to, and even then, barely. The recruit stood up now, emboldened by the silence. Hey, I'm talking to you. Still nothing. One of the older guys at the far table, a staff sergeant with a weathered face, glanced over. He set his fork down slowly. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Not yet. The recruit walked closer. You deaf or something, old man? He tapped the table next to the old man's tray. The old man's fingers twitched once, then stilled. His breathing didn't change. The recruit smirked and looked back at his friends. This guy's a joke. Another recruit, younger, smaller, spoke up quietly. Dude, just leave him alone. Why? He's sitting here looking like some washed-up biker, probably never even served. The old man finally moved. He picked up his fork. He took one slow bite of his food. Then he set the fork down again. Still silent. The recruit snorted and turned to leave. That's when the door to the hall opened. A colonel walked in. Not just any colonel. Silver Eagles. Rows of ribbons no one saw anymore. The kind earned in wars people didn't talk about. He stopped us inside the door. His eyes scanned the room, then locked onto the old man. The entire hall went quiet. The colonel walked across the floor. His boots echoed on the tile. Every recruit froze. He walked past the tables, past the staff sergeant, straight toward the old man. The recruit who had been laughing stepped back quickly, his face going pale. The colonel stopped beside the old man's table. Then he did something no one expected. He stood at attention and saluted. The old man didn't look up. He didn't return the salute. He just kept his hands on the table. The colonel held a position for 3 full seconds. Then he dropped his hand and spoke. Sir, just that. One word. His voice was low, respectful, the kind of respect earned, not given. The old man nodded once. The colonel turned and walked to the far side of the hall, took a seat, and began eating without another word. No explanation, no speech. The recruit stood frozen near the table, his mouth half open. The staff sergeant across the room shook his head slowly, eyes hard, and went back to his meal. No one laughed now. The old man picked up his fork again. He took another bite, then another. He ate slowly, methodically, like nothing had happened. The recruit didn't move for a long moment. Then he walked back to his table, sat down, and stared at his tray. His hands were shaking. One of the others leaned over and whispered, "Who the hell is that guy?" No one answered, because no one knew. Not really. The old man's name was on a sheet in the contractor office. Last name, Harlan. First name, E. No one called him by it. Most didn't call him anything at all. He showed up at 0600 every morning. Left at 1800. Never late. Never early. He worked alone. Swept floors. Fixed doors. Painted walls that didn't need painting. Sometimes he'd be seen walking the fence line at dusk, hands in his pockets, eyes distant. He lived in a small apartment off base. No family listed. No emergency contact. The recruits had been on base for 3 weeks when the incident happened. Before that day, Most of them hadn't noticed him at all. He was part of the background, like the flagpole, like the fence. But after the colonel saluted, everything changed. Recruits started watching him. Quietly, they'd see him in the motor pool, kneeling beside a truck, tightening bolts with hands that didn't tremble. They'd see him in the supply building, organizing crates that had been stacked wrong for months. They'd see him standing outside the admin building at dawn, smoking a cigarette, staring at nothing. One of the younger recruits, a kid from Iowa named Phelps, finally worked up the nerve to ask the staff sergeant, "Sergeant, who is that guy?" "The old contractor." The staff sergeant was cleaning his rifle. He didn't look up. Doesn't matter. But the colonel saluted him. "I know." "So he's what? Some kind of officer?" The staff sergeant set the rifle down. He looked at Phelps for a long moment. "You ever heard of MACVSG?" Phelps shook his head. "Good. Don't ask again." That was the end of it. But the name stuck in Phelps's head. That night, he looked it up on his phone. MACVSG, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, Studies and Observations Group, Special Operations, Classified Missions, Cross-Border Raids into Laos and Cambodia, Recon teams that went into places no one was supposed to go. The casualty rate was over 100% in some units, meaning some men were sent back more than once. Phelps scrolled through declassified reports, blurry photos, names redacted. There were stories of men who never came home, and others who did, but never spoke. He found one photo near the bottom of a forum post. A group of men standing in a jungle clearing, faces painted, eyes hard, weapons slung low. In the back, barely visible, was a man with his sleeves rolled up. His arms were covered in the same kind of tattoos. Phelps stared at the photo for a long time. Then he closed his phone and didn't speak about it again. 2 days later, the base held a field exercise. Live fire drills. Movement under pressure. The recruits were nervous. It was their first time running a full course with instructors watching every step. The old man was there too, not as a participant. He was tasked with setting up the range, checking targets, making sure the firing line was clear. He worked slowly, checking each position twice. The drill started just after 0700. The recruits moved through in pairs. Pop-up targets, timed reloads, shooting from cover. Most did fine. A few froze. One recruit, the same one who had mocked the old man days before, was in the third group. His name was Keller. He was cocky, fast, always trying to prove something. When his turn came, he sprinted to the first position, dropped to his knee, and fired. 3 shots. Center mass. He moved to the next, but his magazine wasn't seated right. When he went to fire, the rifle jammed. He cursed under his breath and tried to clear it. His hands fumbled. The instructor behind him shouted, "Keller, you're taking fire. Move." Keller yanked at the charging handle. It wouldn't budge. His breath came faster. His fingers slipped. Then a shadow fell over him. The old man was standing there. He didn't say anything. He just reached down, took the rifle from Keller's hands, and cleared the jam in 2 seconds. He checked the chamber, reseated the magazine, handed it back. Then he walked away. Keller stood there, staring at the rifle. The instructor's voice cut through. "You gonna finish or not?" Keller snapped out of it. He finished the drill, but his hands were still shaking when he got back to the line. That night, Keller sat outside his barracks. Alone. Phelps found him there, smoking a cigarette he'd bummed off someone. "You good?" Keller didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I screwed up. Everyone jams eventually. Not the rifle." Phelps sat down beside him. "Then what?" Keller flicked ash onto the ground. "I made fun of that old guy. In the chow hall. Remember?" "Yeah. I didn't know." "Know what?" Keller looked at him. Who he was. Phelps nodded slowly. "None of US did. I should have kept my mouth shut." "Probably." They sat in silence for a while. Then Keller asked, "You think he's pissed?" Phelps shrugged. "He doesn't seem like the type to care." "Then why'd he help me?" Phelps thought about that. Maybe that's just what he does. The old man didn't change his routine. He still came in at 0600, still ate alone, still walked the fence line at dusk. But the recruits treated him differently now. They nodded when they passed him, stepped aside in doorways. One morning, Keller saw him outside the tool shed. He stopped, took a breath, walked over. "Sir," the old man glanced up. His expression didn't change. Keller hesitated. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I said in the chow hall." The old man set down the wrench he was holding. He looked at Keller for a long moment. Then he nodded once. That was it. No words. No lecture. Just a nod. Keller stood there a second longer, then turned and walked away. He felt lighter, like something had been lifted. A week later, the old man stopped showing up. No one knew why at first. His name wasn't on the schedule. His locker in the contractor office was cleaned out. The recruits asked around, but no one had answers. The staff sergeant wouldn't say anything. Even the colonel seemed quiet about it. It wasn't until Phelps overheard two officers talking outside the admin building that he learned the truth. The old man had collapsed. Heart attack. He was in the hospital off base. Stable, but not coming back. Phelps told Keller that night. They sat outside again. Neither of them said much. 3 weeks later, Keller graduated from basic training. He was assigned to a unit overseas. Before he left, he went into town. He found the hospital, asked at the front desk. They told him visiting hours were almost over, but they let him go up. Room 314. He knocked once. No answer. He pushed the door open. The old man was sitting in a chair by the window, not in bed, just sitting, looking out at nothing. Keller stepped inside. "Sir." The old man turned his head slightly. Recognized him. Didn't speak. Keller walked closer. He didn't know what to say, so he just stood there. After a long moment, the old man gestured to the other chair. Keller sat. They stayed like that for a while. No words, just silence. Then the old man reached over to the small table beside him. He picked up a folded piece of paper, handed it to Keller. Keller unfolded it carefully. It was old, yellowed at the edges. A commendation letter, dated 1971. For actions in a place that didn't exist. A mission that never happened. Keller read it twice. Then he folded it back up and handed it back. The old man shook his head. He pushed it toward Keller. Keller stared at him. "I can't." The old man's eyes said otherwise. Keller took the letter. He held it like it might break. "Thank you," he said quietly. The old man nodded. Then he turned back to the window. Keller stood. He walked to the door. Before he left, he looked back one last time. The old man was still sitting there, still looking out, still silent. Keller stepped into the hall. The door closed softly behind him. He stood there for a moment, the letter folded in his hand. Then he walked toward the elevator. He never saw the old man again. 2:18 a.m. Years passed. Keller served 2 tours. He came home different, quieter, more careful with his words. He kept the letter in a small lockbox under his bed. He never showed it to anyone, but he read it sometimes. Late at night, when he couldn't sleep, when the dreams came back, the letter reminded him of something. Not the words on the page, but the man who gave it to him. The way he sat in that hospital room. The way he never needed to explain. One afternoon, Keller was back on base for a training rotation. He had rank now, sergeant stripes, responsibilities. He was walking past the chow hall when he saw a young private laughing at someone. The private was pointing, making jokes. Keller stopped. He looked across the hall. There was a contractor sitting alone. Older man, worn jacket, quiet. The private said something loud enough for others to hear. Something about the contractor's boots. How they looked like they came from a thrift store. A few others laughed. Keller felt his jaw tighten. He walked over to the private's table. The laughter stopped. "Private." The young man looked up, startled. "Sergeant." Keller didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You got something to say about that man?" The private hesitated. "I was just..." You were just what? Silence. Keller leaned down slightly. You don't know him. You don't know what he's done. You don't know what he's seen. The private swallowed. I mean, yeah, you did. Keller straightened up. Apologize. Now. The private stood quickly. He walked over to the contractor's table. His face was red. Sir, I'm sorry. I was out of line. The contractor looked up. He was younger than the old man had been. Maybe 50. His eyes were tired. He nodded once, said nothing. The private walked back to his table and sat down. No one spoke. Keller glanced at the contractor one more time. The man met his eyes. There was something there. Recognition, not of Keller himself, but of the moment. Keller nodded. Then he left. That night, Keller sat in his bunk. He took out the letter again. Read it in the dim light. The words were the same as always, but they felt heavier now. He thought about the old man, wondered if he was still alive, wondered if he ever thought about that day in the hospital. Probably not. Men like that didn't dwell. They just kept moving, kept quiet, kept carrying what no one else could see. Keller folded the letter carefully, put it back in the box. He turned off the light, lay back on his bunk, and for the first time in a long time, he slept through the night. 5 years later, Keller left active duty. He took a job as an instructor at a training facility. He was good at it, patient, firm when needed. The recruits respected him, not because he yelled, but because he didn't need to. One day, he was running a drill on the range. A young recruit froze up during a live fire exercise. Her rifle jammed. She panicked. Keller walked over, took the weapon, cleared it in 2 seconds, handed it back, breathed, then finish. She looked at him. Her hands were shaking. He nodded once. She took a breath, finished the drill. When she came off the line, she stopped in front of him. Thank you, Sergeant. Keller just nodded. As she walked away, he realized something. He'd done exactly what the old man had done, without thinking, without hesitation. It wasn't something he'd been taught in a classroom. It was something he'd learned in a hospital room, in a moment of silence, from a man who never had to say a word. Keller retired at 52. He moved to a small town in Virginia, bought a house near the woods, lived alone. He didn't talk much about his service. People in town knew he was a veteran, but they didn't ask questions. He liked it that way. One morning, he was at the hardware store. A young man was there, maybe mid-20s, wearing a Marine Corps t-shirt. The kid was loud, talking to the cashier about his deployment, exaggerating stories. Keller paid for his things and walked out. As he loaded the truck, the young man came out behind him. Hey, you serve? Keller glanced at him. Yeah. What branch? Army. The kid grinned. Nice. I was over in Helmand. Crazy stuff, man. You see combat. Keller closed the tailgate. Some. Yeah? Where at? Keller looked at him for a moment. The kid was eager, hungry for validation. Keller recognized it. He'd been that way once. Doesn't matter, Keller said quietly. The kid's grin faded a little. Oh, okay. Keller got in his truck. Before he closed the door, he looked back at the kid. You did good over there. Don't need to prove it to anyone. The kid blinked. Didn't know what to say. Keller shut the door and drove off. 10 years after that, Keller was 62. His back hurt most mornings. His hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but he still walked, every day, through the woods behind his house. One afternoon, he found a spot he hadn't been to before, a small clearing, quiet. He sat down on a fallen log, looked up at the trees. The light came through in soft beams. He thought about the old man, wondered what his first name had been. E. Harlan. That's all he ever knew. He thought about the tattoos, the silence, the way the colonel had saluted, the way the old man never explained, never needed to. Keller sat there for a long time. Then he stood up, walked back through the woods. When he got home, he opened the lockbox, took out the letter, read it one last time. Then he folded it, put it back, and closed the lid. He didn't need to read it anymore. He understood now. Keller passed away at 71. Heart failure. Quiet. In his sleep. At the funeral, there were only a handful of people. A few neighbors. A couple of veterans from the VFW. No family. The service was short. Simple. One of the veterans, an older man with a cane, stayed after everyone else left. He stood by the grave, looked down at the headstone. Then he did something strange. He saluted, held it for 3 seconds, dropped his hand, and walked away. No one saw him do it. No one knew why, but it didn't matter. Some things don't need to be seen. Some respect is carried in silence, passed from one man to another, without words, without explanation. Just a nod, a moment, a lesson learned too late by some, and just in time by others. The lockbox was donated to a veterans museum. No one opened it for 2 years. When they finally did, they found the letter inside. They read it carefully, tried to verify the details. Most of it was still classified, but they displayed it anyway, in a small case near the back, next to other letters, other stories. Most people walked past it, but every now and then someone would stop, read it slowly, and stand there a little longer than they needed to. The end.